All right, y'all. Thank you for joining us. This is the deep dive. This is the conduit. We're going deep tonight. As I said, this is our new series. We're going to get into it. And for starting off this series, we're going to get into the family court. Now, a lot of folks have struggled with the family court. And I'm speaking specifically to or about Black men, but men in general. And so this is something that is not talked about, needs to be talked about. I've had several people have conversations with me about their experience with the family court. And I received a phone call 48 hours ago from a man in pain, alone, not knowing what to do, feeling railroaded, no options, feels like the court is against him, no support at all. And at this point, this has been going on for years, and he just wants to get his story out. And we can do that here at the Conduit and give voice to the voiceless. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm so glad that you joined us. So we are going to get into it here. We're going to get into the show. And what I want to first do is kind of unpack. Many of you are new to us here this month, so welcome to being a subscriber for the Conduit. We appreciate you checking in with us and getting information. Again, we always ask that you subscribe, like, share, hit that notification button so you never miss out on a show. You know, this show was created less than an hour ago, right? At least, launched so that you can see it. Um, and so you never miss out. Please do those things and definitely share this information out. As I said, I've had this conversation with a lot of men who feel lost, don't know what to do, and they're struggling. They're struggling. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to go deep, as I said before. We'll be bringing in stats, data, stories. We'll lay down some foundation. And then we are actually going to speak to folks that are impacted by this. So again, this is episode 1 in this series. And so I'm so glad that you joined us. Now, for those of you that have been longtime viewers of the Conduit, we've only been here a little over a year. Longtime viewers. I am a subscriber to Dr. HASAN Johnson, and Dr. HASAN Johnson and more than 10,000 other members of the Brotherhood of the Onyx Report have created the Black male political agenda. And I think this is apropos as we were coming up to our primaries here on Tuesday and then the election in November for our midterms. And we have interviewed several folks. We have several more that we will be bringing on. Matter of fact, I just got an email here earlier to set up an interview with our outgoing Commissioner Ed Wolf. So stay tuned for that interview. That will be coming up here in short order. Anyhow, we hear many of the same avocations, right? We hear economy, we hear jobs, we hear education, we hear LGBT, we hear Roe versus Wade, right? But we don't hear a lot when it comes to Black males and their political agenda. And oftentimes, when we do talk about what's important to us, we often are told that that is not conducive. Matter of fact, I was just in a meeting the other day, and we were talking about um, terminology on how you address a group of people. And one of the comments was, well, this is why the Democratic Party is having such a hard time because, they're forcing people to address a certain people, another group of people, in the way that they prefer, right? And so this is what we experience in the Black community a lot, right? And primarily in the Black community, in the Black male community, we are told oftentimes to sit back and, you know, be in the background. So we have toxic masculinity and everything else. And so it's a problem. And so we have been, in many ways, neutered, to use a safe word. Um, and many have just SYSBM, save yourself, black man. They've fallen silent. They've just tried to do what they can do and stay out of the way, right? Kind of go gray man as much as possible. And that's unfortunate because, every community needs both the men and the women of that community in order for the community to strive. For me, I am exhausted of being in the background and have made a decision quite ago that I wouldn't be, right? I wouldn't hold my tongue in order for others to feel comfortable. I've told that story before where, I'm a large man, right? I'm 6'1", I'm 300 plus pounds. And so when I'm in a space, I take up a lot of space and that can be very intimidating. So I smile a lot and I raise my voice to a higher octave to, appear less aggressive to folks. I realized I was watching the podcast that I did on Sunday for the health fair. And I noticed when I was speaking with folks, like, "Hey, how you doing? How's it going? Good to see you here." Right? I mean, it just falls right into that. Trying to make people feel comfortable and not speaking in my regular voice. Now, there's a lot that's behind that, right? I've got a 10-year-old daughter, so some of that is, hey, that's my baby, so I'm going to talk to her in a certain way. So some of that is that, right? But some of those things is that also, right? And so again, can be very difficult when just your mere existence is a threat and undesired. We see that there's still a lot of police brutality and other things that are going on in this country against black males. And so when you look at the list of who is advocating for our particular rights, either Republicans, independents, libertarians, Democrats, there's no one that's talking about our particular interest, right? Roe v. Wade, women's interest. LGBT, women's interest. Asian Pacific Islander, anti-hate bill, immigration. These are all very specific, but there's nothing for black men. No one is talking about what their issues are, right? Our issues tend to be dwindled down to, police brutality, um, maybe CRT, CRT, yeah, critical race theory, whatever, right? But we're a lot deeper than that, right? We're parents, we're business owners. Uh, we have a lot of different interests, and as such, uh, no one comes and asks us what our interests are. You know, how will you earn our vote, and then we are demonized and chastised if we decide to vote in another way. So there were a few black men, uh, and not really significant in the overall voting, right? Because black people primarily vote Democrat, but there were a few black men that decided to vote for Trump, and those black men were demonized. But right now, in the Hispanic community, um, their favorability for Biden is at 19%, right? So they don't get the same chastising, the verbal tongue lashing that black men get or the black community gets. And so these are the things that need to be recognized. And what's really unfortunate is if you look at how things are laid out, right? Democrats would tell you, oh, the far right Republicans, they're racist. Um, they're white nationalists and whatever the case may be. So you know you can't vote for them. Okay, okay. And you say, so you vote for us, and it's like, all right. So, well, what are your issues, right? And it's like, well, no, you're just supposed to vote for us, and we see many of the exact same things here on the left, even on the far left, which is very unfortunate. So we do not have a voice. As soon as we start to speak up, as I was saying in the intro to the show, of what this show is going to be, we're not going to get into shaming. We're not going to insult. We're not going to try to guilt or need to be right, right? And we're not going to engage in the uh, whatabouts, right? So, what about this? What about that? Right now, we're talking about family court reform in regards to black men primarily, but men primarily, right? Do women have issues with family court reform? Sure, they do, but that's not what we're talking about. So we're not going to engage in, as I give stats and opinions and data and things of that nature. Well, women this and women that, right? That's not what we're talking about. And we know that you can see instances where that's very frustrating. When you're advocating for whatever you believe in, and someone comes to you and says, well, what about? Right? You're not even listening to that, or you just gloss over it. Yeah, I'm sure it happens, but not as much as it happens over here. Right? So what about this? Well, what about that? We're not doing that. And that's the whole problem with not being heard, not being listened to. It is important, right? And this is important on several different levels, right? We are black people are about 13% of the population here in America. And, while no demographic is a monolith, by and far, we do vote uh, Democratic. However, we have been really sold a bill of goods, you know. Um, and it's like, well, the Republicans are worse, so you vote for us. We're not as bad. And that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. And black men are coming to a point in their lives where they're not going to be uh, chastised or put in the corner and told to shut up and you're toxic and you're bad and you're evil and whatnot. And what is very unfortunate about that is what ends up happening is black men disengage. And again, every community needs their men and they need their women. Men are the warrior class, right? Who are the builders, etc., etc. So as we disengage, one, we're picked off one by one, and two, that support isn't there. And we spend so much time fighting amongst ourselves, we can't advocate for the larger issues. Lastly, before we get into tonight's topic, I think another thing that we have trouble with is getting caught up in dealing with the symptoms and not dealing with the actual issue. So, is the traditional family fractured? Is the divorce rate or the single parent households the highest in the country? Is that a huge contributor uh, to why we're losing our young men and even our young women to gangs at an earlier and earlier age, while we see them committing violent acts on Instagram and Facebook? Like they're not going to get caught. Like what is going on? How does your cute little baby at 3 and 4 and 5 turn into someone that you don't recognize, that's not in your home and is terrorizing the neighborhood at 13, 14, 15, and on? Where's their support? There's this big push, this buzzword of generational wealth. When are you going to have generational wealth? Most of us, are good majority, are setting up GoFundMe's when someone passes away. There's no life insurance policies. There's no savings. And if you're going to create generational wealth, that wealth isn't for you. That wealth is for your children or your grandchildren. And really, it's probably going to have to skip a generation. And so, are you doing the things? Are you making all of the sacrifices to actually build something that's going to last into the next generation? And are you teaching your children and your grandchildren the skills that they're not going to squander it as soon as they get it? And we look at all the gentrification that's happened in the Central District and Rainier Beach and all these other places, whether it was black home ownership, and they came in and offered some money, and the folks sold out. And you look up and those properties are so expensive now, they'll never, ever get back into those spaces. These are the things. But we're so concerned on solving the issues. I was talking with the captain of the Salvation Army today, brought the kids down from the Goodwill Youth STEM Academy, STEM Youth Academy. And we handed out water and food because, of course, it's like 96 degrees outside. And the captain ends up coming out and speaking and saying, "No, it's great that you come down here and do this, but garbage is a big issue. So people bring stuff down, folks drink the water or, stuff that can't be used or whatever. And then it's all here. And so there's this big green dumpster that's overflowing. And he wanted to see if we would help him pick up the trash. Like, well, we can't do it right now, but I'll be back down there Saturday." Shout out to the G team and Living Life Leadership and BHEA and all the others that will be down there Saturday from 12 to 2. But, yeah, at some point, as much as they need a cold bottle of water and as much as they need, uh, a container of food, we're just attacking the symptoms. In some ways, we're part of the ecosystem that keeps the problem going. How are we actually solving the issue? Or actually, are we doing worse and just allowing the issue to perpetuate? Because, well, Salvation Army is there, the rescue mission is there, the rejuvenation center is going to open up here in a little bit. You got different organizations bringing food, water, and clothing down there. So, business as usual. What is actually happening to solve the homeless problem? To solve affordable housing? That's what I mean by really looking at hitting the symptoms and not really attacking the disease. And so I believe in this regard, what we're going to get into tonight with family court reform is one of those disease conversations, not symptom conversations. We're getting closer to disease. That's not the one and only thing, but it's a lot closer than looking at it on the other side. So let's go ahead and get into it. I think I might do a little monologue before I go ahead and go into this. Might be a. Oh, all right. So again, this is Dr. T. HASAN Johnson. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to listen in. Again, I'll put his information is in the chat. You can go out and support him. And let's get into family court reform.
Message and Twitter, but send me your concerns. Send me examples of what you think should also be on the black male political agenda. Because despite what we went through in the last few weeks with the election, one of the things you did not see is a clearly outlined black male political agenda. You saw some groups on Zoom that got together to talk about how black men feel about different things. You saw this kind of battle in media going on where it was almost preemptively blaming black men for the loss of Biden to Trump. it was interesting, right? There was this kind of notion that black men were going to be the fall of Biden's campaign and responsible for Trump, if they voted over, 25%, something like along those lines. And it was absolutely ridiculous. And all of it was really predicated on pressuring black men to vote for Biden. And so, with that, the Onyx Report, alongside a number of others, Green Gorilla's channel, Dr. Ronald Neal, BGS Ibmore, we all opted for Dr. Ronald Neal's notion of black male independence. And that wasn't an advocacy for Trump or Biden. It was really advocating for black men to think independently, to decide upon what their interests are and determine for themselves rather than be pressured what issues are pertinent to them and what they should be concerned about, and therefore who they should vote for. And the shaming be damned, right? Shaming be damned. And that's one of the things we fought for with the Onyx Report. And
So if you remember, Ice Cube went on and spoke to the ladies on BET, and he talked about a black agenda, and he was attacked as he was laying it out. And it's like, well, so what are you doing for women? And he's like, well, he's doing things for black people, but some of those things in there were for black men, and he was attacked for it. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm referring to, right? We're told to sit back. We're told to shut up. And so when someone is taking some leadership and trying to advocate and put their money behind it, right? Ice Cube is got an initiative right now for $100 million with the NFL, which hopefully goes through. And we can have a conversation about the fact that I believe that what Jay-Z did was just providing the NFL cover while putting money in his pocket. I don't really think that he's actually done anything for Black Americans with his deal for the NFL, although he uh, disguised it as such. Now, Ice Cube is talking about actually uh, building revenue and building partnerships with Black businesses and the NFL. But we were attacked. He was attacked for advocating, right? Biden said during the 2000 election on the Breakfast Club, you ain't black if you ain't voting Democrat. Kamala Harris, she said, I'm not going to do anything for just black people. But consistently, they're doing things for other groups of people. They pushed through the Asian Pacific Islander hate bill. Just pushed it through. But we still don't have African American hate bill. Right? That's not popular. Let's continue.
and other, aligned content creators on Twitter. I mean, on excuse me, on YouTube. We fought for independently and be treated independently. Now, with a black male political agenda, I've never seen one in my lifetime. The majority of the time, the issues come up around voting season. They're at best issued, kind of like black issues. They're kind of labeled as such, And then the last few years, I've heard more about a black agenda than I've heard in a long time. A lot of debates going back and forth, ADOS, FBA. What should a black agenda be? I fully agree with reparations in regard to that.
So, another thing, there's acronyms here, and I'll try to explain those, right? As you know, we were, we were called the N word. Then we went to Negro, Black Americans, African Americans. Now we kind of sit between Black and African Americans. But now we have some new terminology. So we have ADOS, African Descendants of Slavery, and then we have FBA, Foundational Black Americans. I identify as a foundational Black American. So that would be how I would want to be referred to as, not an African American or Black, although I'll say that because that's basically how I was raised, and that's what people understand. But I consider myself a foundational Black American. Now, what is the difference between a foundational Black American and an ADOS, uh, an African descendant of slavery? That means the diaspora, right? So that's folks from the Caribbean and Haiti and all over the place would be of African descent of slavery. right? We're talking about foundational Black Americans, slaves that were brought here to America to build, right? And so when you think about reparations, right? And I definitely believe in reparations. And I think it's one of the reasons why this country still struggles because they have not done right by foundational Black Americans. But when you consider, right, technically, Elon Musk is an African American, right? If he has American citizenship, Elon Musk is from South Africa, right? That makes him an African American. And so when it's time to have that reparations discussion, you're going to see a whole bunch of folks coming out the woodwork and having their hand out and saying, hey, I'm African American, I'm Black. And so if you were in Haiti or if you were in the Dominican Republic or somewhere else, right, you're not a foundational Black American. So FBA, the slaves that were brought from Africa to the United States and their descendants. ADOS, right? There is a difference. And so again, you'll hear folks say, especially on the left, well, why would you separate that out? And what good does that do? And you shouldn't do that. And you're being divisive with your own people and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, but y'all don't tell LGBT folks what to do. You don't tell uh, our AAPI folks what to do. We don't tell our Hispanic community what to do. But somehow it's okay to tell Black folks what they need to do. Everybody always seems to know best. Let's continue. So I just wanted to put that, and I'll put that in the chat too, so we have that.
But I do think it should be taken a step further because I think there have been some gender dynamics that have taken place in the last 50 years that complicate things. And I think it's gotten so complicated, particularly the influence of a certain strain of Black feminism, what I refer to as Black feminist nationalism. It's gotten so extreme, in my opinion, that it has really, in many ways, split the Black community. And, even if you've never heard that before, the issues that come with that split that we talk about all the time on the Onyx Report, the tensions between Black men and women, even the tensions that we saw in this past electoral season. If you watched Ice Cube come up with his contract for Black America and watch the response, not only from mainstream media, not only from the Democrats who accused him of associating with Trump, but also from many Black women that argued that he was just in disguise voting for Trump and tried to disrupt the Biden campaign. And Q was very straight. He said, "Look, I've been working on this thing, for months with people like Dr. Claude Anderson, Dr. Derek Hamilton, and I just want to, implement it with whomever is in a position to meet our needs." And yet he was still dismissed by a number of people, particularly Black feminists, and they made the argument that he was, subtly misogynist because he didn't ask Black women something specific for them. He didn't ask anything specific for Black men either, but nobody cared because there hasn't really been a Black male political.
Exactly. Exactly. And then this is what I'm getting to, right? Uh, and so we haven't had a voice, right? Dr. Tiason Johnson is a little bit younger than I am. He is doctor. All due respect there. And at the same time, he's in this world. He's in this space. He is one of the only Black male studies here in the United States. So he is well versed on what is out there. Okay. And this is the situation, this is the scenario.
Agenda. So nobody knows what Black men want. And so this that I've compiled and I put onto my blog, and I'll leave the links in the description box, but the blog is newblackmasculinities.wordpress.com. And one of the first things you'll see posted up there is the Black male political agenda. So this series, I'm going to go over, each one because there are, what are we up to at this point? I updated. So this is a developing series. We have 14 major points, but there are a lot of sub points under each one, or most of them. Most of them have one. And the big.
And we are going to get into family court reform, but I needed this dialogue to be present to lay that foundation. As I said before, This is what the deep dive is about. Really going into that analysis so that we can have some a deeper understanding. Let's continue.
Biggest one we have is the point that we're going to cover today, and it has over 10 or 11 kind of sub points. So I'm through those just so you can kind of have a sense of what it is that many Black men are dealing with. So I last updated this October 29th. All right. And I will continue to update it as new ideas come in. But the first one we have is family court reform.
All right.
And this is a big one. This is a big one. This is the one that Black men responded to more than really any other point, including law enforcement. But family court reform was huge, and it of course deals with the whole.
Again, now this is more than 10,000 that have contributed to this, right? Family court reform is higher than issues with police. But nobody knows that. Nobody knows that. No one's listening to that. Let's go.
Whole issue of what the family court's power is in impacting the lives of Black men, and often that power being in the hands of Black women. So you have this kind of instance where family court doesn't really become an issue until you start talking about divorce. Right? And once you start talking about divorce, you tend to have two disgruntled people who are separating, but one often has the institution of the family court at her disposal in many ways. So, child support, alimony, even though alimony's gone down in the last decade, a few decades, child support is a huge one. These issues tend to be very problematic, especially for Black men, because again, Black males lack inherited wealth. Black folk lack inherited wealth. So we tend to not have inherited wealth. We tend to function on income rather than familial wealth. And for the most part, especially when you factor in incarceration, Black men are the only group of men that make less than their women, right? So Black women make about 63 cents on every white male.
Hold on. We need to rewind that. You've never heard a stat like that, right? Again, what we hear is, well, we need equity in regards to pay, right? That men are making more than women. And there's a lot that goes into what exactly are you talking about? Are you talking about the same jobs? What jobs that are going into? But he's talking about something very specific because people have heard these arguments, right? You know, for women that believe that they aren't paid the same amount that men are, and men have their counter narrative to that. Those are the two uh, pieces of thought that exist out there. But this is one that no one is talking about. And this is what I mean about black male avocation, right? Let's go.
Dollar. White women make about 75. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's about 67 cents on the dollar that Black account for incarceration. It goes down to 51 cents. And the reason most groups don't account for incarceration is because incarceration is not supposed to be as high as it is. But because Black men are targeted the way they are, it does. It has a.
And it throws off the numbers, right? So if you're going to have that argument that, well, women make 70 cents for every dollar or 69 cents for every dollar that a man makes, all of a sudden, when you take out and you're just looking at black men and black women, all of a sudden the numbers don't work. So you have to omit that, right? See, now we're starting to get to not the symptoms. We're getting closer to the disease, right? Because disproportionately we are locked up, where we receive longer sentences. We're murdered, we're killed. Let's continue.
Tremendous impact on the Black community. So at any one point in time, you have about 1/10 of the Black male population incarcerated at a time, and it tends to be 1 out of 3 that will see some type of imprisonment in their lifetime. So that said,
Again, 10% imprisoned. It's a huge number. 1 in 3 that will interact with the criminal justice system in some fashion. 1 out of 3. Let's continue.
It has a huge impact on Black life. So if we are suffering from massive unemployment, which in many ways we have been for years pre-COVID, and something like, and then really it doesn't take much to make Black male life difficult. It really doesn't take a lot because of how much we are suffering in other areas. It doesn't take a lot, and when you take something like family court, right, that impacts Black men in so many ways because it is a product of an intimate relationship, right? It is, and when I say product, I mean when that intimate relationship splits, even if it doesn't, result in a marriage, if it results in children, right? Family court can still be a powerful ally in her struggle, especially if that struggle is in any way about revenge, and it can impact Black male lives. So, going through this, the first point that Black men brought up was the issue of child custody, right? And the idea behind that was that, and I'll read it here, says this includes automatic 50-50 child custody as long as fathers can prove what mothers are required to, as far as being able to provide a stable and safe living environment. Once determined, pre existing income based alimony slash child support judgments levied against Black men should be reassessed, right? So the first point they added is that child custody should automatically be 50-50. The second point is that mandatory paternity testing should.
Hold on, let me stop there. Uh, okay, so again, this includes automatic 50-50 child custody as long as the fathers can prove what mothers are required to as far as being able to provide a stable and safe living environment. Once determined, pre-existing income-based alimony child support judgments levied against Black men should be reassessed. I mean, I that seems very fair to me, right? You had a child together, and we're talking about ownership, right? It's both of your children, your child. So then, why, if there is a separation, and do the rights just automatically go to the woman? And if you go back and you know your history, you can go and look at the tender years doctrine. That it wasn't that way, right? If there was a divorce, actually custody went to the man, right? And uh, tender, tender years doctrine came along, and they changed that. They changed that. So you can look that up and see how that was. So it wasn't always that way in this country where custody went to the woman. It used to go to the man. And so equity would be 50-50, wouldn't it? Let's continue.
Happen at birth, right? Birth certificate, newborn children should be given a DNA test to assure the parentage of the father, thus avoiding men being unjustly responsible for supporting children under false pretenses.
Now this is really important. This is critical. The numbers of false paternity are pretty staggeringly high. I think it's more than 20%, where either the mother wasn't sure or she flat out lied. Okay, that's alarming. And so, yes, there should be a paternity test that is given to determine, yes, this is the man's child. It's the woman's child because she birthed the child. But it's not clear if it's the man's child. And you can follow stories all the time on YouTube and other platforms where these stories are just coming out and coming out and coming out. There was just a story, I believe, in China or Japan, where the guy found out that the son wasn't his. The son was like 4. Took the son to school, dropped him off, and that was it. You know, the school's calling. He's like, I'm not coming to pick the kid up. It's not mine. Called the grandparents of the father. They're like, no, we're not coming to pick it up. It's not our grandchild. You know how painful that is to think that you're the father, that you're in a monogamous relationship with the woman and you have this child together just to find out that that's not your child? That's destructive. That's destructive and it's dangerous. You know, again, we look at symptoms and we look at the disease, right? Is that the only reason why there is violence against women? I think there are two women just now that were brutally murdered by their husbands. You know, one of them was online on social media saying that he was um, in a gay relationship with his superior officer, and he ended up. This was in Hawaii. Ended up stabbing her, and killing her. You know, these things are happening, but what are the we can look at the symptoms, but what is the disease? You know, that's a big one to that will cause a man to go off the rails, to believe that this is his child, to financially support, to emotionally support. And a lot of times when you put your name on that birth certificate or they put your name on the birth certificate, even if it comes out later that the child isn't yours, you're still on the hook. And that can cause a man to go crazy. These are simple things that can be fixed. These are simple things that can be fixed. And now we look at Roe versus Wade. Republicans are now trying to pass a law through that child support starts at conception. So now the woman says, well, I'm pregnant and it's yours. And if that were to go through, then he would be on the hook immediately for child support. And so it's really easy to say and shame and guilt the man and say, well, you should have wrapped it up or you should have known, you should have got to know her better. Should have known who you were sleeping with. See, we say those things when it's the man. We don't say it when it's the women. You know, oh, he was spitting game and, he talked her into it. You know, he manipulated the situation. You know, I hear that a lot. And it's like, well, he should have used protection, or he should have, if he didn't want that to happen, he knew that was the outcome, then that's on him. And that's not the answer. That's not the answer. So yes, mandatory paternity testing. And so could you imagine in the way that the country is now? And we could call it hookup culture, right? But this is what we're saying is that we accept. A lot of Roe v. Wade is my body, my choice, right? So his body, his choice. If he's out here and, this is what it is, folks are having sexual relations with each other and there's a pregnancy, if it's not his, he should not be on the hook to take care of that child. So, yes, mandatory paternity testing can fix that. Why should he have to live in a lie? And why can't men make unsound decisions? If we're even saying that's an unsound decision, right? Again, her body, her choice. His body, his choice, right? Two consenting adults. But he's not expected to be lied to about a pregnancy. And see, it impacts all of us. So for those of you that have sons, it can impact your sons. For those of you that have daughters, if she does this and he goes off the rails and assaults her or whatever the case may be, it's a problem. So we have to start attacking the disease and not the symptom. We need to really actually have the hard conversation. We talk about the hard conversation, the conversation gets hard, then the shaming and the insult and the guilt and the need to be right come out. Or the what ism or what aboutism. Well, what about when? Well, what about when? We're talking about men right now. We're talking about men right now. Let's continue.
And there was a later addendum added to that point once determined that the father has been misled. Now, this obviously applies to fathers who fathered children prior to this particular point being made law, right? And those fathers should be able to benefit retroactively. So the addendum says once determined that the father has been misled regarding the child's parentage, no matter how long it has been, he should be excused from both the birth certificate and child support upon his request. The exploited party should be subject to legally sanctioned reimbursement from the mother, the biological father, and whatever relevant city, state, and federal government institutions may have played a role in this. So, in other words, what we have happening right now is that if you have been, as a man, listed as the father on the birth certificate, um, there's a great deal that can happen to you legally because your name is there, right? And even after finding out that you're not the biological father, many courts will still make you responsible for parental responsibilities, fatherly responsibilities, most particularly in regard to child support, even though you're not the father, even if you've been lied to. So one of the things that we're pushing for here is that Black men, upon being, it being clearly identified that they are not the father, should not have to continue to be responsible as if they are, right? So that's the point being made there.
And if she knowingly lied, that's fraud, right? It's theft. It's fraud. If all of a sudden his check is being garnished or he's putting out this money to support a child that isn't his, and her knowing that if he had known that, he wouldn't be with her, he wouldn't be claiming that child, that's fraud. See, folks always want a lot of new laws and do different things. Really, a lot of it is just exercise the laws that are on the books and exercise them evenly. If the standard is 2 months in jail for stealing, then it's 2 months in jail for stealing for her, for him, for they, for a black person, for a white person. It doesn't matter. What you do for one, you do for all. But this is fraud. I have girls. I don't have boys. But if I had boys, I damn sure would not want my sons to go through that. I love Layla to death. I couldn't imagine finding out that after all the love and everything that I poured into her, and my attachment, to find out, oh no, she's not yours. She lied. That'd be destructive. It would be devastating. I also should make clear, um, this conversation that we're having here on family court reform doesn't have to do with me personally. So I'm not having any issues um, with Layla's mother and Nakoya's mother, and Nakoya is an adult. So I want to be clear, right? This conversation doesn't have to do with me personally. All right, I should have said that at the top of the hour.
Letter C, the third option, reinstituting at fault divorce standards, right? In alignment with gynocentric family court policies, no fault divorce negatively impacted Black men by authorizing a massive shift in marital culture that dramatically underdeveloped them economically. Right. So basically, no fault divorce meant that you could arbitrarily get a divorce, for any particular reason. And of course, the impact of that is was pretty dire in terms of how courts began to treat men. And I always kind of frame Black men as men whose feet were closer to the ground economically. They didn't have as many options, didn't have as much in terms of wealth. And the difference meant that white men didn't really have to come to grips with the power of these family courts and the power of no fault divorce for several decades, later. But black men felt it immediately in the 60s and 70s. They felt it immediately, and part of the reason for that is they had less wealth. So the impact of this was very sharp. So, some of the brothers have opted to ask for, at fault divorce standards to be reinstated, right? So that there be a reason for divorce and that women can't just arbitrarily divorce men simply because they can, right? The fourth option, letter D.
And again, I would believe that a lot of that is centered around, you engage in a marriage, right? And I would say traditionally, right? Um, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you promise to cherish, hold, yada, 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 for as long as you both shall live? I do. And a little bit later, it's like, I'm not in love anymore. I want out. But I need all your money. I need half, which destroys the man. So he's thinking he's in this forever. And it's like, well, you just wasn't feeling it anymore. It's no one's fault. We're just not in love. So, I want out. And a lot of these archaic laws were on the books because there was a lot of inequality years ago, right? But in our community, well, I think even nationwide, right? Women are collecting more education than men are, especially in the black community, right? Black women have, the government jobs and everything else. You're seeing them everywhere thriving. So, to be destroyed in that way from a no fault divorce, I think that's what they're talking about in that regard. All right, let's continue.
Financial abortion, right? And this is one that's been going around for a little while now. And I think even Dave Chappelle joked about it in one of his last Netflix specials. And his joke was that men should be able to opt out of a pregnancy that he doesn't want to be involved in. And of course, the audience didn't take to that well. And he jokingly said, "Well, if you can kill the child, I should at least be able to abandon him. And if that's wrong, then maybe we're both wrong." And I thought that was quite profound and brilliantly put. But basically, what it has to do with is it says, as we understand the law, it is a woman's right to choose whether or not she'll carry a baby to term, put the child up for adoption, or abort it within the first 6 months after being informed, right, about the pregnancy. Men should have the right to financially disassociate themselves from the pregnancy altogether, right? Now, we can also talk about the limited options birth control wise that men have. I mean, men have condoms, the pull-out method, abstinence, just a few, right? You can also get snipped. You got about four options. Women have over 30 different forms of birth control and over five major forms, and that doesn't even include abortion. They have options before, during, and after the sex act. Men have very few. And even though condoms, everybody says, well, condoms is all you need. It's 99%. Look, I've had condoms bust, and I was as young as 15. So if I could find out at that age how fallible this little piece of plastic or piece of rubber is, then there's got to be some other options. And if there are not going to be other options, there should at least be options that are non pharmaceutical that allow men some kind of leeway instead of being punished and having all the decision making power going to the woman in question. And since it is her body and her right to do with her body as she wills, that's fine. But men should have the option to do what with their wallets what they will. So that's what the financial abortion.
All right, this is a big one for me. We were talking about this several months ago, and this one I definitely agree with. This one I definitely agree with. You know, if we are going to be pro-choice, then if a woman is choosing to have the child, the man should be able to choose not to have the child. Again, equity. And so, yes, the term financial abortion, I think is appropriate, right? Because he doesn't determine whether or not she carries the baby to term, if she gives the baby away, or if she aborts the child. And so if you're pro choice, then I believe this is also pro choice. You are choosing to have the child. The man does not want to have the child, then he should not be responsible. That should not be forced on him. Just like she should not be forced to give birth to a child that she doesn't want to give birth to. See, when you drill it down, it makes perfect sense. Let's continue.
Abortion is about. The
Another thing I will say again, here's another one of the shaming tactics that you'll hear, right? Well, you should have, been more careful. You should have practiced abstinence. You should have wore a condom, as Dr. T was saying, right? Well, you did it, so now it's your responsibility. And we're quick to say that and hold black men accountable. That's your responsibility. That's what you need to do. That's what you should want to do. That's what a man would do, right? But we don't say that to our women, right? It's pro choice. Well, it's going to affect her ability to take care of herself. It's going to be a financial burden. All these things are said and it's acceptable and understanding when it comes to the woman. But for the man, nope, that's your responsibility. You need to man up. These are the examples that I'm continuing to share with you. These are the thoughts and the feelings of thousands of men who have never been able to voice how they feel. And this is our political agenda. These are the things that are important to us. Let's continue.
option for men to have that. And it's critically important where it says within the first 6 months after being informed, not the first months of the pregnancy. All that would result in is a lot of men not even being told, right?
Yep.
Especially if it was a one night stand or an ex girlfriend or, just kind of not a day to day, cohabiting in the same house relationship, right? If it's just not that type of relationship, the clock for 6 months of decision making on the man's part should start when he is formally informed, and that should be documented in some kind of way. When he is officially informed, he
Right.
should have 6 months to choose from that moment. Right. Letter E, the fifth option, child support value system. Right. Instituting a system where goods, services, and time spent with a child is calculated and valued at a dollar amount. Any remaining deficit to be paid in cash. Right.
Let me
So
pause there.
basically,
Oops. Let me pause there. So, you hear a lot where they say, housewife is, one of the hardest jobs and it's not compensated. So if you were to actually, uh, you know, figure out the wages for a woman being a cook and cleaning and doing all of the housewife um, work, then I think they were saying like it'd be a six-figure salary, right? But no one ever does the calculation on what a man does, right? Both at work and at home. You don't calculate that. And of course, there's more and more stay-at-home dads every day now, right? And in the black community, there's a significant amount of stay-at-home dads. And why? A lot of that has to do with, again, as Dr. T was saying, somewhere around 1 in 3 will have an experience with the criminal justice system in one way or another. For those that are hit with felonies, that can and usually um, limits what it is that they can do. It's definitely going to limit their lifetime earnings. You go back and you look at education, our boys at the fourth grade level have super high illiteracy rates. Our teenagers, those that are graduating, they're having low literacy rates. Math skills are low. So earning potential over their lifetime, it's going to be tough. So how do you calculate? So you're going to see more stay-at-home dads, right? Well, no one's hiring me. We've seen the studies from Harvard and other places, with the black sounding names when you turn in a resume and they go in the garbage, or comparing a resume that's exactly the same with a black sounding name and a white name, and not seeing the errors on the white resume, but seeing, picking out all these errors on the black resume. We know this stuff exists, right? And we're told toxic masculinity. When I worked for the Navy, for Fleet and Family, it was like 3 out of 50, employees, male employees. And then I was the only black male employee. And so when you bring up some of the dynamics that were happening in a space that is so uneven, they can't even see it. They can't even see it. So they won't acknowledge it, right? Or you get the what ism. Well, what about ism? Well, what about when this happens over here, or when there's more men than women, or what happens when that's not what we're talking about here. This is the situation. This is my experience here. This is what I'm talking to you about. It's a problem. So, yes, we need to calculate what that actually looks like. And again, if it's 50-50, think about the economics of it all. Many of you can't afford to pay the rent here in Kitsap County, or wherever you're listening to this. You can't afford it. You're working 2 and 3 jobs. You're going without. You got credit card debt up to your eyeballs. I was going to say something else. And you're trying to do the best you can, right? But when you become a non-custodial parent because you don't have 50-50 custody, and now you're paying child support, you're trying to pay your own rent, cover your own bills, and you may be being garnished 25, 50%, or even more of your check. But when your child is with you, you're still spending money. If they have a room, you're still setting up their bedroom, right? And as a non-custodial parent, I can attest to this. Your time is short. So you're going to do more activities. You're not going to have as much of just kind of laying around the house and just being in each other's space and orbit, right? Because the time is so short. So you're going to go out and you're going to do things, which requires an expenditure of money. You're not going to qualify for tax credits in Section 8. So, yes, it should be 50-50. And we're in a time now where we have a lot more equity. Again, our women are more educated than the men are. They have more education. We look at all the stats. Dr. T talked about it earlier, right? When you actually add in the black men that are in prison, we are the only demographic that make less than the women. But no one talks about that. See, and they have the stats. They just choose to omit it because the numbers don't work right. Let's get back into this.
There should be other ways that men should have their resources valued beyond just cash. And this is most particularly important when it comes to men with very few means, because at the end of the day, when you really look at the impact of poverty when it comes to fathering, this is an issue that impacts people across race as much as folks don't really want to admit it. It has a profound impact, particularly among the poor, and can really have a deleterious effect on Black men in particular, right? When they're not able to do what others can. So let me see. There's a
And he's
quote I like to.
and he's going to pull that up. But again, you know, think about the average Black man. I believe makes $45,000 in this country. That's the average, right? Cannot survive. We just had on a candidate for Congress that was saying that, you know, the studies they were looking at, you need $30 an hour. That's $60,000 a year. The average is $15,000 lower. That's the average. And they're doing all they can, where they can. But again, it's sign language. They're shamed, they're insulted, they're guilted. Well, you shouldn't have done that then, right? But see, they don't have the bailouts and the supports that the women do. Now, if there was 50-50 custody, then he could be eligible for those benefits too. A housing stipend, the largest expense that someone has. Child care, food stamps, whatever that is, right? And we see it a lot in the community, right? There's this entitlement that comes with it. Well, I have the child, so you need to pay me child support. And maybe I am on this subsidy. I am on Section 8. I'm not paying rent, or I'm only paying $200 a month. I'm receiving food stamps. I have child care. I'm getting a fuel card. I've got health care. I've got all these benefits coming in, and the man doesn't have these benefits. On top of that, I also have male suitors that are coming in and also helping and supporting me. And because the way that dynamic still works in this country, right, where the man is supposed to pay, well, she has an undocumented resources coming in through other men. He doesn't have that because that's not how it works, right? He's supposed to put resources out. And so it's very frustrating when a man is, you know, given what he can. He's trying to maintain his household. He's trying to make sure that he has resources. So when his child is there, he has, you know, the resources to spend on those children, clothes, going out to do things, paying for their events, things like of that nature. But you see all these ancillary things on the other side. Nails done, hair done, everything did. It's like, man, I'm not living like that. I'm barely making it. And if I'm behind because I'm impoverished and I can't afford to be evicted, you suspend my license and you take my ability to drive. But I need my car to get to work. So we do everything so backwards in this country, right? You got bad credit, you're going to pay a higher interest rate. Now, people that are wealthy, they actually could pay the higher interest rate, right? But you're going to charge a higher interest rate to those that have bad credit that are low income, knowing that is going to increase their likelihood to default, but they need this to survive, so they're going to take a chance on it. It's backwards. We're talking about equity. So you make it 50-50. He has a child, 50% of the time. She has a child 50% of the time. She can go to work. He can go to work. They can maintain their households.
Read whenever this comes up, because this is particularly important. And this comes from Collier Meyerson, right? This is an article titled How Our Racist Child Support Laws Hurt Poor Black Fathers the Most." And in this article, they point out, according to David J. Pate, Associate Professor of Social Work at University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, the government, according to Pate, is owed $150 billion in child support, but 70% of that money is owed by Americans who make less than $10,000 a year, right? And
Are we even understanding what is being said here? No one is talking about these numbers.
70% of that money is owed by Americans who make less. Jay Pate, associate professor of social work at University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Um, the government, according to Pate, is owed 150 billion in child support, but 70% of that money is owed by Americans who make less than 10,000 a year.
How are you surviving on 10,000 a year or less? You're not. Could this be one of the catalysts on why men lose it? Because they feel hopeless? That no one gives a damn about them? They have no support? And the court doesn't even see it. And we're socialized to say, well, you know what? Be a man, get another job, go to school, work 3 jobs. You had the kid, it's your responsibility. Figure it out. And we keep telling men that. And what's happening is men are killing themselves. They're killing their children. They're killing the mother. Lots of proxy violence, intimate partner violence. Again, symptom disease. If no one gives a damn about me, why the hell should I give a damn about them? And at some point, I don't have anything to live for. We pretend like we can't even understand it. And we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to address it. Because we got other fights that we're fighting for, right? Other things that are more righteous in our mindset. Because men, particularly black men, don't matter. Throwaways, cast offs. During this series, I'll play videos from divestors and other folks that speak real grimy about us, right? I've even talked about this previously. Yeah, black women calling us bullet bags. And that they should abort boys. Don't birth black boys. These are things that are on YouTube. And think of all the censorship that happens. Folks that can't say things like COVID, right? You watch your favorite YouTubers and they call it the beer bug or something else. They've got all these different words for other things because it's going to mess up with the algorithm or it's going to demonetize them. So they're very careful how they speak. Oh, but you can call black men bullet bags all day long and encourage other black women to abort black boys, black black male babies. You know how painful that is to hear that. That sounds like some KKK super racist ideology. Okay, let's keep going.
And if you happen to be incarcerated, and by the time you get out and find out you even have a child in some instances, already in arrears, right? So there should be alternative means by which men's resources are measured beyond purely cash. So goods, service.
You know what? That's another one too. Shout out to Civil Survival, Tara Simmons for all the work that they do for the previously incarcerated and the restoration of rights and helping with restitution and doing away with all the interest and things of that nature. But these things impact us because we're disproportionately uh, the ones that are locked up here in this country. Disproportionate. So you get out, you have this record, Maybe you were there for what you should be. Maybe your sentence was excessive. Maybe they lied. See a lot of it. But the one thing that we know, there's laws on the books. And again, if you're gonna exercise and enforce a law, enforce it for everyone. So when you're at the nightclub in the hood at the end of the night, and you know folks are gonna get behind the wheel and they drinking and they're smoking and doing what they do, and you waiting for them to pull away so you can whoop whoop pull them over and give them a DUI or a DWI. The DWI. They're not going to the frat house and the sorority house and doing that. They don't want to ruin their lives, right? They're just kids. So again, if it's equity, you do the same thing to everybody. If you're handing out 2 years, everyone gets 2 years. That's it. All right.
Is time spent should have should play a role. Letter F, right to life. Post divorce, men should be entitled to the life they have been accustomed to in marriage. Thus, any judgment or a consent determination made must ensure that husband can enjoy the same privileges and lifestyle enjoyed before or during the marriage, whichever costs more to maintain. Now, again, I didn't write many of these. And, I have a son, but I'm a widower. I'm a single father. So, I didn't go through divorce. These are things that men have been writing in. I just want to be clear about this. This is not, all of these are not coming from me. These are coming from men who have lived these experiences and are talking about what they really need in response. Right? Letter G, require formal child support management.
Hold on. And let me again state, right? You're talking about right to lifestyle. When you met me, I was living a certain lifestyle, right? When I met you, you were living a certain lifestyle. And maybe we grew together. But our separation shouldn't make it to where I operate at a deficit and you remain up here, right? You want out, no fault divorce. You want out of the relationship. That's a choice. So if you're entitled to this great standard and you help build him to whatever, that is said. I get it. Like with Bill Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates, they were together from I think college or whatever. All right, y'all came in, you built it together. But in other scenarios, right? He's already established, and you come along, right? And we're married, and you're like, I want out because women initiate divorce. I think at 80% of the clip, and it's like, well, no, even though I was down here and you brought me up here, I need to stay up here. Like, no, you want it out. But what ends up happening is, hey, we met, I was here and you were there. I brought you up here. We divorced. You stay here or go up and I go down. That's not equity. And whether you're married or not, if there's children involved, again, if you make it 50-50 custody, we both go to work, we both take care of the child. We're both going to assume those responsibilities. And if that means neither one of us are eligible for Section 8 and food stamps and everything, then so be it. But it shouldn't be that he's just out in the wind, right? Again, homelessness, the majority of folks that are homeless are men. And when you drill down in that demographic, the percentage of men who are homeless, the majority are black. Again, affects us the most. But the heartstrings tug for women and families. Incarceration, homelessness. The disease, not the symptoms. We have to start looking at the actual disease and not the symptoms. Let's continue.
Reports. Ensure that child support payments are earmarked specifically for approved child related expenses only. Payments used on non child related expenses must be accounted for by the custodial parent. Shout out to Xavier. I also want to shout out a number of the others that have have impacted this. Adam Ibmore, David Stewart, Tristan Bryan, Chief, and most particularly BGS Ibmore. All of these brothers contributed to this to build it up. So, child support management reports, right? Wherever that money is going, should be documented that it is definitely being focused on the child. And that would definitely be an impactful thing right now because a lot of people are struggling and using payments for all kinds of things. So that would definitely have some impact. Next up is H, prohibit jailing for failure to pay child support. Such incarceration frequently punishes men for being poor more than anything else. This, in turn, increases Black male unemployment and further hurts families' economic stability. This has to do with men, most particularly, losing their driver's licenses, going to jail. They could lose apartments or homes, marriages, jobs, so on and so forth. Because, as I said in the last example, if they're too poor, and this is not to say that they are too poor to do anything for their children, but they may be too poor to do what courts arbitrarily say they should be able to do. And see, that's the missing piece to this.
Now think about the
It's
trick.
not just
Think about the trick bag in that, right? Maybe you were living together and or you weren't, right? You're dating, you're paying your rent, everything is you're poor, right? You're making $15 an hour, you're making $20 an hour if you're lucky. So you're just covering your rent, you're trying to stay ahead of the game. And this child comes along. And it's like, okay, well, now you need to give me 25 to 50% of what you're making. And we're going to garnish it. So again, if you say $20 an hour, just to make it nice, right? 2,000 hours is full-time work per year. That's 40,000. Multiply it by 0.8, you're bringing home about $32,000. A $1,500 apartment is going to cost you 18,000. You started with 32. I just did this exercise with the kids yesterday. You have less than $20,000 left. But again, because you made 40, they're saying, hey, 25% needs to come up off the top. Right? We taking 10 grand of that off. So now, how does he pay his rent? Go get another job. Well, he also needs to spend time with the child when he has the child, right? So how's that supposed to work? So now he can't pay his rent. So what he does is, I can't pay her this month. I got to pay my rent. She's pissed off because she didn't get money. Child support, because it's going to keep on going because he can never get ahead, right? Hard to get a job. He's dealing with whatever he's dealing with. Again, the billion or so in child support outstanding. What was it? 70% of those men make less than $10,000 a year. So what do? They take his driver's license. Well, he needed his license to go to work. He's been going to work, right? This is where you see folks where men are forced to work under the table because they can't survive otherwise. So if they report any of that income, it's garnished. And then what we say is, again, we just shame the men. Work harder. It was your fault. You should have known better. You shouldn't have picked that one. You picked wrong. But we don't tell that to her, right? We just give her the benefits. Give her the child, give her the Section 8, give her the food stamps, give her the, right? And I've done a previous episode where we monetized, we gave those things value, right? It's like $70,000 when you're looking at child care, health care, WIC, Section 8, food stamps, support systems. So you take his license, it can't work, right? What does that do? It fractures relationships. You're having assaults at handoffs to give the child to the other parent. You're having proxy violence where a cousin or a friend is putting on their simp cape and coming to show out because the dad is upset. Can't make it, he can't survive. And what's happening? That's why these things need to be itemized, right? Equity. So you show up and 200 on your hair, 100 and something on your nails. I can't even pay my rent. I'm behind. I was evicted. I can't pay my car note. They took my license. I'm driving dirty trying to get to work. I had to quit my job because the garnishment, I can't. And there's no way out of it. But what happens? We use stupid things like BIPOC and we say, oh, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And we state those Black stats. And then we go and we give all the resources to everyone else on that list. Just happened in our city council meeting the other day. They were talking about how the darker your skin is in America, the worse off you have it. That there's statistical data to support that. And how important the REACT is. And how important looking at things through a race equity lens is important. But then it's like, oh, nope, the feminists say, well, it's about women. The LGBT community say it's about LGBT. Folks just say, well, it's just, we just need to look at equity altogether. But they use the stat of the darker you are, the worse you have it. And we see these things all the time where they use police brutality, literacy, imprisonment, homelessness, all the things that affect our community more, that affect Black men more than even Black women, and then say, here's the resources for Black women. And then when we're joining gangs and we're the Pookies and Ray Rays, then people want to say, well, what's wrong with y'all? Do better. How? With what? There's a lot of educated people that understand what institutional systemic racism is and how these things work. But all of a sudden, where it's time to apply the resources and actually fix what's wrong, all of a sudden they can't see it because they're too busy trying to get their own bag at the expense of their sons. And that goes for men and women. At the expense of their sons. And everyone's wondering why Chicago and California, Chirac, and all these other places look so crazy and it's so dangerous. Why the hell you think it is so dangerous? Now, at the same time, we don't want the police to go in and just mass murder all these boys, right? Because we'd be talking about police brutality. But they're done turned up, right? They're killing each other at the funeral procession, at the gravesite. They pulling up at McDonald's and shooting in the back seat when the guy got his kid in the back. And we're seeing all this stuff now. This stuff's on IG, Facebook Live. But they're 15, 16, 17. These are your babies. These are your baby boys. So what is the actual solution? And not to the symptom, but to the disease. And I submit to you that family court reform is one of the big ones. Let's continue on with Dr. T.
It's the matter that, you should pay, it's often determined by a court how much you should pay based on what they calculate you should pay. And for many men, it's way more than they can afford. Especially if they lose their job or anything else happens, it can be difficult for men to get into court and
Not even if they don't lose their job. Do you know how many homeless shows and housing shows I'm doing now? I got the Housing Coalition on once a month. I've got KCR and Bremerton Housing Authority on once a week. I'm working with the uh, Bremerton Housing Equity Association, other organizations that are working with homeless folks that are experiencing homelessness. We're making food and delivering food for folks that are suffering from food insecurity. We're providing rental assistance to so many folks that can't afford to pay their rent. They're out of money now. And there are people that need a second and a third round of funding. So everyone is talking about how they can't pay the rent and it's too high and something needs to happen. And what are they going to do? Add child support on it. Add that you're a non custodial parent and you're not eligible for all these resources. And so now the system has men and women pitted against each other, right? Because even with all the resources that I might be getting from the state, or if I'm holding down a job and I make just enough where I'm not eligible for these supports, but I'm one, 3-week COVID illness away from not being able to pay my mortgage or not being able to pay my rent, even with how hard I'm working. She's using her degree. So she's like, I gotta come get that money from you. I'm entitled to that 25%, that 50%, that 75% garnishment, the arrears that you owe because you ain't been paying. You need to come get that. You need to give me that. So it pits us against each other, right? And so if it was 50-50 custody, then she would have 50% of her time to go and do what she got to do. He would have 50% of the time to go and do what he has to do. You want to do a subsidy? You split the subsidy. Daycare benefits both parents. Right? We're moving on into these modern times, but then we're still holding on to some of these antiquated policies and procedures that don't work. And so when you're seeing intimate partner violence, again, what is the symptom? We look at the symptom, but what is the disease? Yeah, I'm gonna feel some kind of way when you living it up and I'm freaking dying and I can't survive and I can't make it. And I'm working 2 jobs. I'm working 60, 70 hours a week. If I'm able to see my child, I'm asleep. I'm passed out. I'm nodding off. I don't have the energy to interact. If that's even being allowed for me to access. I got my no insurance ticket, driving without a license. They know it's me. I'm taking the back roads. They calling me by my name. Hey, Mr. Anthony, you taking care of that license yet? No? All right, you know what we got to do. We got a bench warrant out for you. We die younger. We could commit suicide at higher rates. Our our health is worse. Our hypertension, high blood pressure. And what happens when we can't take anymore? This is a lot of what you're seeing out here. When we're looking at all of this senseless violence, and we're like, how do we get here? Why is it so bad? But we don't really want to fix what the problem is. Let's continue.
Have their judgments reassessed. Next up is letter I, income floor for child support. This has 3 bullets to it. There should be a set minimum income for anyone on child support. If someone is chronically under this floor in terms of income, then state governments should provide opportunities for them to intern at an apprenticeship in a trade. Only if they quit and refuse to work in an apprenticeship should they be incarcerated. Shout out to BGS for that one.
So
Right?
stop
So
there. Right. Think about that, right? Incarceration aside, which was supposed to be a place of rehabilitation, right? You would get skills in jail, you can get your education in jail, you come out, you'd be a contributing member of society. So how do we fix it? This sounds like teaching a man to fish. All right, you're making less than $10,000 a year. All right. You are now, I believe from a stat that I saw earlier, black men are making the least amount of money in the country out of all demographics. So you need some kind of vocational training. So we're going to provide a program for you so that you can be self-sufficient and you can help support your children, should you have any. Because it costs so much to actually incarcerate someone. It costs so much. Many taxpayers are like, I don't want to have to pay for all these social services for people. So it's like, well, you're going to pay one way or another. So how would you like to invest your dollars? Would you just like to throw your dollars away? Or would you like to invest your dollars by investing in your neighbor, by investing in humanity, giving folks the skills and the tools so that they can go out and make a viable income? I can't think of what her name is. One of the politicians, Senator, she's a Democrat. She's the finance person, one of the finance people. But she's the one that advocates for, free college tuition or forgiving student debt. And she's making some ungodly amount of money at the college or university that she teaches at, and she only teaches one course. She's making over 6 figures. For one course? So how is higher education cost so much? That's one way. You're paying one person 6 figures to teach one class. I don't give a damn if Elon Musk is teaching that class. It's not worth $100,000 a year. And you're teaching once a quarter or once a semester because she probably doesn't teach in the summer. That's insanity. That's what paying a livable wage would solve a lot of issues. Again, the symptom though, right? Because you can pay 30, still probably not high enough. You're making $60,000 a year. Multiply that by 0.8. You're bringing home 48,000. But again, you owe, let's say 25%. So you need 15,000 that's going to support. You're at 33,000. You still have child care expenses on top of the support, right? Still got to pay your rent. We're still operating off that $1,500 a month for rent. It's another 18 grand down. Still can't survive. So that is the symptom, not the disease. Who's advocating for this? That's why there has to be a black male political agenda. And again, although I'm focused on black men, this helps men, period. This also helps everyone. So yes, an income floor for child support, absolutely.
For poor men, as opposed to just assuming that everyone should be able to pay a certain amount and they should go to jail if they can't. Other additional options should be put in place. Next up is letter J, child support and alimony assistance program, right? Where it can be proven that a man's child support and alimony judgment requirements are causing a practical impact on his standard of living. State government and municipalities shall pay the cost in whole or in part or no less than 66% of the total cost of the child support and alimony payments. I think what's hoped here is that there might be a reduction in arbitrary amounts of judgments against men. That might be reined in a bit and made more realistic on a more consistent basis across the board, so that especially for poor men, if they're not able to make it and the state has to make up the difference, it might be a little more reasonable. But as long as the onus is put solely on men, regardless of their income status, it can be a bit taxing. Next up, and this is the last one dealing with family court reform, is K, tax filing options. At income tax time, many women sell their children's social security numbers to friends, family members, etc., either when the mother is not working or has maxed out her two-child benefit to receive income credits. Thus,
I have known so many people that have done that. I know people that are currently doing that. Let's continue. I think y'all know some people too.
number one. So there are four elements to this last bullet point. I told you some of these got pretty in depth, right? So, in terms of tax filing options, number one, whenever a third party submits tax returns claiming care of another person's child, any child support orders to the mother of stated child should be rendered void, or denial of the third party's claims on the child as a dependent. This should fall under saving tax dollars. The natural question should be, why is the mother being paid for a child under the care of a third party, right? So, trying to really kind of challenge, the selling of children's social security numbers arbitrarily. Number two,
You know,
welfare benefits
hold on.
and incentives.
You know what's interesting about that too is, again, as I was saying, this system is designed to pit men and women against each other, right? Because oftentimes, with all the resources that she's eligible for, or if she falls in that category where she's making just enough, where she's not eligible for anything, these are the tactics that she feels that she has to resort to because she can't make ends meet, right? So she feels like she has to do it to survive for her and her babies. And he's stuck because he can't do nothing. And again, there's scenarios where this is flipped the other way too. But we're talking about this right now. These are systems that must be dismantled. And so in this, you've never heard me once say that women are bad or that they're evil. Because they're not. Let's continue.
For women fuel the single mother phenomenon. So, to eliminate welfare contingencies or to incentivize contingencies for fathers, stop subsidizing single mothers. Again, men are writing in, and these are the issues that they have. This is the coming from the experiences that they've had. Right. Number three, any child support paid should be considered earned in.
Okay, let me just comment on that. Right, welfare benefits and incentives for women fuel the single mother phenomenon. So exactly right. There's a video I'll show you later on in this series where they're interviewing eighth graders and they're asking them what do they want to be when they grow up, and they're like, I'm going to get pregnant and I'm going to be on Section 8. An eighth grader, that was her life goal. She watched her mom do it, and she knows I won't have to go to work. I'm going to get these benefits, and it's going to be easy. And so think about it, right? Some people say, yeah, why would you work harder? You should be making work easier. So let me get this straight. If I get pregnant and I have a baby and I get rid of the dude, so I don't have to co-parent with him, I don't have to listen to him, I don't have to communicate and, work things out with the partner. I get to make all the decisions. I'm going to be on Section 8. I'm going to have a housing voucher. My rent is going to be subsidized based on my income. And since my income is zero, I'm not paying any rent. Then you're going to give me food stamps. Then you're going to give me child care. So I've got the day I can put my child in child care. You're going to give me WIC. You're going to give me my own medical. You're going to give me gas cards if I decide to go to school, right? You're going to hook me up with all these things. I could do that and just YOLO, live my best life at that level. Or I could go to work like homegirl's doing and work 40 hours a week, and she's stressed out. She hates her job. She's dealing with toxic masculinity. She's dealing with the glass ceiling. She's making too much to be eligible for benefits, or doesn't makes too much for the benefits to really be significant. So why would I watch you work 40 and 50 hours a day and you're exhausted and you're pissed and your anxiety's up and you're depressed and you're sad and you don't have time for yourself and you don't have time for your kids when I can just get on the system and let them take care of it? And if it works out right, you'll have it into adulthood. I mean, into your kids' adulthood. Your kids are grown adults and you still have your voucher. What is the incentive to do anything the other way? Okay, well, you know what? Maybe I can't pay for that trip and go and take all the great vacations that I want to do. But there's even still programs for that too, right? I can take a job. This is one of the tactics. I'll take a job right before tax time. That'll make me eligible for earned income credit. I'll get all these thousands of dollars. I'll say I'll sell my tax, right? Which is bullet point one. And again, because the way society is set up, the male suitors, they're going to come in and take care of me on top of the benefit. And it doesn't work that way for the man, not typically. So welfare benefits and incentives for women do fuel the single mother phenomenon. Because if that option didn't exist, the percentage of women that would exercise this option would decrease substantially. All right. Again, disease, not symptom.
Income due to it being taxed. Women are allowed to claim child support as an extra earned income that improves their ability to finance vehicles and other products and services. Men who pay child support are not allowed to claim payments made when filing taxes, even when the amount can be a third to even 50% of their earned income. And I tell people this all the time. My very first day teaching at Fresno State, we went through our orientation and they let us know as a state employee, up to 100% of your check can go to child support arrear. Now that didn't, it didn't impact me because that wasn't my concern. So, I'm not saying this because of something that's happened to me. I'm saying this because these are the issues, these are the ideas that Black men have been contributing based on their experiences, right? So child support being treated as earned income, um, and how it allows women to improve their credit, their ability to finance vehicles and other products, whereas men who pay child support are not allowed to claim those payments made when filing taxes, even when the amount is up to half their income. And lastly, we advocate policy that exempts child support.
And again, you know, men riding around in these buckets, the cars breaking down, a lot of folks look forward to that tax return that they're going to get so that they can make those bigger purchases, right? Man, I've been trying to get this car fixed. I've been riding on these brakes for a minute, the transmission's going out, whatever the case may be. Then this thing is done. I'm going to use this tax credit, my tax return, to put a down payment on another used car. And then he doesn't get the tax credit. I'm going to use the tax credit to move into another place, a safer place, a cheaper place, a place closer to work so it can save on my gas. a place that's on the bus line so I can get on the bus, a place that's closer to my kid, whatever the case may be. The system is pits us against each other. Black male political agenda. Election Tuesday. What candidate is talking anything like this and advocating for the black men here in Kitsap, for men in Kitsap? What happens in November? Is Kilmer advocating for the black male agenda, political agenda? Are the other people that are running against him, are they advocating for the black male political agenda? Are they going to go to Washington and try to push these things through on our behalf and fix the situation, which I think would go a long way to repairing the black community? Or we're going to pass local laws? Are our commissioners who are running, do they understand what our issues are? Can they even see our issues? Have they even sought out to ask us what our issues are? Or did they just assume Black Lives Matter? That's our issue. We're a monolith. And if it's something else, then it's toxic male masculinity. Again, I say consider your boys. Consider our girls. I don't want my daughter getting caught up with a guy who's unhinged, emotionally fragile, overly emotional, prone to outbursts and violence. Because of his situation, the way that he is treated and moves through this country. Right? It affects me too, and I don't have boys. So I'm concerned for my daughter. I'm concerned for my granddaughters. Are they going to have options? Are they going to feel like, well, hopefully they're not making decisions that put them in a space based on, ooh, he makes me tingle. He's hot, but he ain't good for me. Our value system is so skewed. Girl, he is fine. You know he ain't no good. He's a scammer. He's a drug dealer. He's this. He's that. He's not responsible. But man, girl, mm. We gotta fix this.
Payments from the applicant's gross income when they apply for public housing or housing assistance. The payment is counted income for the custodial parent and counted in the gross income for the non custodial parent. Their gross income dictates their acceptance into the program and their rent amount. Some men may not qualify due to their gross income being over the limit, but he may not actually bring that amount home due to child support payments. His rent may be exceptionally higher since HUD states that 30% of gross income should go to rent. This leads to a plethora of issues for many Black men in the community, such as homelessness, joblessness, and the propagating of children born out of wedlock. So, yeah. So these are the
Again, as he's about to explain that, right? Yeah, that's HUD's recommendation. 30% of your income shouldn't be going towards your rent, right? Or no more than 30%. So, again, if you're making $20 an hour and you're working a 40-hour work week, you're bringing home $800 a week, $3,200 a month. Again, you multiply that by 0.8 to get your taxes and all that good stuff out of there. You're taking about 2,500 home every month. If you're paying 1,500 for rent, you're paying more than 50% to your rent. Oh, but you got child support. Let's hear from the doc.
The major points under family court reform that's on the Black No Political agenda. Feel free to suggest other ideas or comment in the comment section about what you think about these. But at least let's spread the agenda around so that we can at least be able to frame what it is that Black men are thinking about. Because one of the things you'll notice as you go through this list, a lot of it is not something you've heard before. A lot of it are things that are very far out of the discussion, any political discussion going on right now. And that's mainly because Black men tend to have a different set of political interests.
And here's the thing, not only do we have a different set of political interests, but unfortunately, our women are going to shame and guilt us. But other men will shame and guilt us. As I said before, take care of your responsibility. You're a man. That's what you're supposed to do. She ain't got to do all that. That's what you're supposed to do because you're a man. But he can't. Most can't. Those are the stats. Those are the facts. The music has already stopped, and there's only chairs for 10% of us. 90% of us are standing up. And when you talk about, you know, people will say, oh, how can Republicans vote against their own interests? Democrats do the same thing. But when we say stuff like that, like, how can you vote against your own interests? These people are telling you stuff that's not good for you. How can you not see that? Men in our own community will tell other men that. It's the equivalent of saying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And we find that tremendously offensive when white people tell us that. But when we say it to each other, somehow it's acceptable. We are resilient. But I believe that we've laid down, we've gotten lazy, we've given up. Where are our contemporary heroes? We keep going back to Malcolm and King, Newton, Garvey. Who are our contemporary? Farrakhan. Who are our contemporaries? We don't even follow people now. I was having a discussion with some folks, and they're like, they don't even want to be leaders. They don't want to be a face. There shouldn't even be a leader because you can cut the leader's head off. So now it's the absence of leadership, the absence of accountability, the absence of actually solving the disease, the absence of actually addressing what the issues are, the absence of being empathetic and sympathetic to the situation, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and see how it impacts them. When you can't pay your rent, how is he supposed to pay his rent and pay child support at that rate? When you were with him, you see he couldn't get jobs. You saw the jobs that he got, what he was getting paid. You see what his ceiling is. You know what his capacity is. He wasn't that reading level at fourth grade. He wasn't that reading level when he graduated high school. A lot of people, high school, college isn't for me. Education isn't for me. And that's true. It's not for everyone, right? College isn't for everyone. They're in a single parent household. father is pitted against the mother. The values, the lessons, there's an absence. So how are they supposed to get the grit and determination and the resiliency? How are they supposed to overcome? Your children are supposed to outlive you. Your children are supposed to do better than you. For so many of you, your children are doing worse than you are. And if you're a grandparent, they're doing worse. We're heading in the wrong direction. And we spend all this time pointing at institutional racism, systemic racism, toxic masculinity. But we don't look at what's right in front of us and address the disease and not the symptoms. We're so caught up. The world shook when George Floyd was murdered. People were all locked down. They had to stand to attention. They marched. They rioted. There was momentum. But as soon as society opened back up, everyone went back to sleep. The eviction moratorium is over. There are hundreds here that are on the wait list. There are hundreds more that aren't even able to apply because they already received help once or twice. There's no telling if the program is going to come back. Evictions are going to increase. As I was sharing with the kids earlier, look around. Seems like they're erecting just as many housing units as they are erecting storage units. Storage units mean you need a place to store your things because you can't stay where you were staying before. So if you watch, you'll see it. So if that is the situation, but the family court stands as this obstacle to pit father and mother against each other, and they're both trying to survive for these finite, inadequate resources, what do you expect to happen on the other side? We're seeing every example of violence, and Kitsap County is not immune to it. I would report stories that are, national stories. DC, Florida, Chicago, Philadelphia, California, New Orleans, East Bremerton, West Bremerton, Gig Harbor. It's here. It's here. What are we going to do? How are we going to change it? Can we change it? Let's let Dr. T finish up.
Nobody wants to talk about that because we're supposed to have interests that align with everyone else among the left. But at the end of the day, if Black men have a different set of issues based on a different set of experiences, then that should be listened to. And we're finally writing it down so it can be shared and viewed. Right. So anyway, that being said, keep an eye.
All right. So that is Dr. T. HASAN Johnson. I put his information in the chat so that you can follow his channel. I also did what I don't normally do for folks when I kind of cover their stuff. I will link their channel and give them a shout out, but I also put on there how you can support him monetarily. He has done a lot of work. I look at him as one of our contemporary leaders. I'd love to have him come to Kitsap and speak. Very knowledgeable brother with, to me, a lot of answers to many of our questions. to many of our questions. I would love for him to come here and speak. So again, his information is in the chat. If you would like to support that, that would be great. I do want to leave you with words of wisdom again from Dr. HASAN Johnson.
Brothers, be reminded that we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, brainless henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, warriors, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who would genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic, selfish, and unrealistic needs. You define your worth, brothers.
All right. I am a deep dive advocate for the voiceless. This is our series on family court reform. Do tune in next time. As I said, normally, I think we may do shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're working on the format, but they will be late in the evening, 9 or 10 p.m. Tomorrow, well, it's officially tomorrow now. It is July 29th. This is my father's Ascension Day. So I will find a way to honor my father, and that would be the reason there would be not have a show tonight. Okay? All right. Again, thank you for joining. Please share, like, subscribe, hit that bell, or share this out. Men need to see this video. Women need to see this video. Young men, young women need to see this video. If it's going to change, it is going to take us all to make that change. We got to do something a different way. We can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And we don't have time to get folks into position to make this incremental change as we watch the decades go past. We're falling further and further behind. Things are getting worse and worse for our community. Got to take it seriously. We're at a precipice. I hope that we're not too far gone. We can be delusional and be overzealous on our capability. But there is a limit. There is a line. And if we're not on that line or over that line, we are so close to the line, we've got to back away. All right. Until next time, this is The Deep Dive. I'm Arwan Cameron. This is The Conduit. Stay cool.